significant. So just want to acknowledge all the staff, all the community members, all the effort around this table to get quite a number of things over the line, and just want to, once again, thank you to everyone who's been involved this term. It has been a pretty intense one, lots and lots of workshops and meetings from some pretty big decisions. So we're going to move to the item 7. I would just move, and the Mayor would like to second the agenda item recommendations, but with also some additions. We can go through those after staff go through the presentation, but everyone... There's no point of order from the floor, Member Matson. Thank you. Right, so we'll move to those and then we'll get staff to come to the table. Right, so I might just talk about how today's going to run. So we will have a presentation from our staff. We will then have questions on the presentation and the agenda item. I will open and speak, and then we'll go to, there's 2 amendments that have been put out there this morning. We'll go to the amendments after I've spoken, and then debate those and debate the substantive as well. So we'll go to the presentation now from Megan and John. Kia ora.
Morena koutou, great to see you, and I am just going to go through a presentation which is intended to just keep it reasonably high level and focus on the key aspects, both in the report and in the conversations that you've been having over the last, 2, possibly even 3 years in terms of some of this information. Obviously, we will have staff and ourselves available to answer questions afterwards. So this is not intended to go through all of the detail of all of the matters before you. So the purpose both of the report and of course your decision today is to decide whether or not to withdraw Plan Change 78 and progress the draft replacement plan change before you, or to proceed with Plan Change 78. Just some quick background for you. Remembering that the previous government, in conjunction with the current government, agreed some changes to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development back in kind of 21-22, and that included the MDRS, the Medium Density Residential Standards, which was a new provision which basically put that across the whole of the urban region of Auckland. It was mandatory and it kind of went in there all at once everywhere. There was no consultation with councils about that, including ourselves, and this council has raised concerns about that, about its location, and about some of the design outcomes that come from it because of the kinds of height to boundary and bulk and location controls associated with the MDRS. So those conversations and concerns have been, were first raised by this council some years ago. The requirement then formed into what is known as Plan Change 78 to give effect to the changes to the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, and that also included the fact that that plan change cannot be withdrawn. It was quite an unusual provision in the Resource Management Act. There's no other provision like it, but for this one, it was unable to be withdrawn. 2023, we had the severe weather events, and in particular, both erosion and flooding, and we have been unable, because of that provision, to either downzone or to change the rules and policies to somehow deal with the impacts of severe weather in some parts of our region. And so that has also been an area of concern since 2023 to the previous government and this government around our inability to deal with any of those issues through the unitary plan. So this government, it came through the parliamentary process finally on the 21st of August, which was later than we were expecting, but nonetheless it came through, that to enable us to deal with both the MDRS and natural hazards, but there were also some requirements that came on top of that as well. So while we are able to opt out of MDRS or make a decision about whether to continue that, and to also both downzone and change rules and policies for natural hazards, there are things that the government is also requiring of us. So firstly, around housing capacity, they're requiring that we have to have, ensure the same or more plan-enabled capacity as Plan Change 78 had. And Plan Change 78, because of all of that MDRS intensification across the whole of the region, it's a high capacity. But we are required to have the same or more. We're required to provide for 15-storey height limits around 3 stations. We're also required to provide 10-storey heights around 2 stations. We are required to continue with the National Policy Statement on Urban Development's Policy 3, which is the intensification around in walkable catchments around centres. And we're also required to use a streamlined planning process, which is one where the Minister has some more say than he normally does, or that they normally do. And it will be a shorter process than normal, hence in the name streamlined planning process. So we were given some things, and then when there were things required of us. Just very briefly then, an overview of what's happened since that 21st of August date. The committee made the decision to consult on the draft replacement plan change, which has been happening over the last month. That was specific consultation with mana whenua, local boards, government and local authorities. There have also been some public meetings from groups in the public and elected members around the draft replacement plan change. We followed that up with some workshops over the last couple of weeks, and now here we are today to make your decision on either withdrawing and replacing or continuing with Plan Change 78. And the words just talk about some of the next steps, which I can come back to a little later. In the report, you will have seen this table. I just want to be really, really clear. The purpose of this is not to make any pejorative statements about good or bad on either of the options. It isn't about ranking them, but it is trying to give you an understanding based on the issues that have been of importance for council, how positive or negative the options would be, in achieving those kinds of opportunities. So if I just go through it reasonably quickly, and again, we can take questions on all of this. The ability to downzone for natural hazards where the risk is highest, so that is to lower the zone down to, say, a single house zone. That is what the draft replacement plan change allows us to do entirely. Plan Change 78 does not, without additional processes and additional plan change post the completion of Plan Change 78. Similarly, with natural hazard rules and policies, that is what the replacement plan change allows us to do now and immediately. The same thing with Plan Change 78, there needs to be another process. So it's not as fast, but should a variation or policy, a plan change be put into Plan Change 78, that could also occur, but it's not as fast and it's another process. Removal of the MDRS, Plan Change 78 does not allow us, full stop, doesn't. The replacement would. The Auckland Light Rail Corridor upzoning, again, Plan Change 78 does not. There would need to be another process, a variation process to enable that to happen, whereas the replacement plan change, it will happen as part of this single process. The plan-enabled capacity is the same. I've just said that, the government's requiring us to have the same or more than what Plan Change 78 has, so that's the same. The spatial distribution, though, of where that capacity is different. In my view and my advice to you is that the replacement plan change provides a better spatial distribution. It is better and closer to a compact city approach, and therefore it does assist with our infrastructure planning and investment as well. Use of qualifying matters, both Plan Change 78 and the draft replacement plan change allow us to use qualifying matters, those things where we just have another layer on so that we can deal with certain things that are particularly important in the region, whether that is something like flooding or special character or volcanic view shafts. Pre-draft public engagement. There was no time, given when the legislation came through from government, there was no time for us to do that with the draft replacement plan change. So clearly, that does not meet that at all. The Plan Change 78 did, and that is what we did. So it's clearly a positive to Plan Change 78. Complexity of process. This gets quite subjective about it. I think the complexity, Plan Change 78 does get complex because it needs variations and then it needs further plan changes to do everything that the replacement plan change does. So that is complex. We shouldn't underestimate the confusion that will cause for Aucklanders, and we've discussed that over the last few years. The draft replacement plan change, yes, it has complexity. We need to withdraw Plan Change 78. We put another one in. But it is simpler, in a sense, than Plan Change 78. And the time to complete the draft replacement plan change will clearly be faster than Plan Change 78 because we will need another whole processes to go after Plan Change 78 is completed. So that's quite clear. So look, as I said, this is not about good and bad. It's not making pejorative statements. I'm just trying to help you think about the implications of each of them and what might need to happen to achieve those outcomes that are important to you. In terms of the strengthened approach to natural hazards, I know you've worked through this for a very long time. So just very briefly, and again, we'll have staff here to deal with specific questions you might have. The staff have worked incredibly hard, both with the public and with iwi as well, over the last couple of years, to look at how we can strengthen the provisions in the unitary plan around natural hazards. In particular, erosion and flooding, because those were the biggest causes of concern come from 2023. And in short, what we are doing is we're moving to a risk-based assessment, so that in every case we will have a look, we will look at the particular circumstances on the site, and if there are significant risks with developing, whatever that might be on that site, it kind of ranges from, it would be a reject, we would just say no, right through to various conditions or design requirements or even location, i.e. you can't build in a certain part but you can build in another part. So both the rules and the policies will be strengthened through this, and also we will downzone in the places of highest risk, we will downzone to that single house zone as well. We have worked with iwi and mana whenua, particularly around flexibility of relocation and some of the particular situations they are in with their whenua, whether that's close to water bodies or the coast or flat wetland as well. There's also a bunch of internal staff training and guidance and things that will, of course, come through with all of that. So a lot of work done on that. There is a strengthened approach, and it is a risk-based approach. Just a few reminders around these issues of capacity and infrastructure. Just a reminder about what plan-enabled capacity means. Plan-enabled capacity is really the number of homes provided under the rules. It is not meant to be a target for which we expect all of those homes to be built or for that kind of population to come to Auckland. That number will never be developed on the ground. And the number is just over 2 million in this case. And we will never see 2 million homes, and that is not what we are expecting or projecting or intending from an on-the-ground perspective. And as the report says, and again we can answer questions around this, the government is very clear that having greater capacity than what you need does provide for more competition in the market for different kinds of homes in different locations and in locations where people most want to live. And so that is the theory behind having, a theoretical plan-enabled capacity number. Housing supply, on the other hand, is the actual take-up, what's actually being built on the ground. And we know that in the last few years we've had building consents approved for, kind of between 14 and 20,000 homes a year. That's the kind of number we're talking, as opposed to a 2 million number. We use the housing supply plus population projections from Stats New Zealand and modelling about how many people will come over time and where they might go, and we try and help enable that through the unitary plan and also through our infrastructure planning and investment. So in terms then of infrastructure, the planning and investment is not based on the plan-enabled capacity. It's based on, the population projections, what's actually happening on the ground, and trying to get ahead of growth if we can. And the more certain that council can be about where we want to enable that growth, the easier that is going to be. And it has not been easy lately. Governments of any colour are making it very hard for council to plan and to be certain and say we're going to go here and not here. So it's a tough job at the moment, but we are trying our best. And the draft replacement plan change is a better situation, is more helpful from an infrastructure planning and investment perspective than Plan Change 78. Not perfect, but better nonetheless. Just very briefly, in terms of that plan-enabled capacity, and these are again some numbers that you've just received. And again, if you want more information, we are very happy to take questions and work through this with you. But we've got that total number of 2.073 or 2.074 million, and we have effectively two options, and it's depending on the kind of design and bulk and location requirements we have in the 10 and 15 story buildings. We will come somewhere between 0.2% or 3.5% under that 2.074 number. So almost there. And this is on this particular modelling run. We will do another modelling run post the decision, whatever it goes. And those numbers may change, but that is where we think the range is at this stage. These two slides, this one and the one coming, are again based on that spatial distribution, the work that Gary, as chief economist, and his team has done, taking the modelling work, taking what's happening on the ground, and looking at the draft replacement plan change. Again, it's a model, so it's not perfect and it's not absolute, but it is a projection, a model of the kind of where new homes will be broadly under in the replacement plan change as opposed to Plan Change 78. What this is showing in the red dots is that generally there will be fewer new homes in these areas. The size of the dot is the greater number or lesser number, and you can see, in general terms, that is on the outer edges broadly of certainly of the isthmus and of the urban region. And this one is there will be generally more new homes. And so you can clearly see that within that central isthmus area, along those clear corridors, both rail corridors and frequent bus corridors, and in that kind of more central, if you want to call it, and more accessible area of the region. That's it together. And so that's the from a distribution, spatial distribution, that's kind of the comparator. That is what you will tend to see through the draft replacement plan change over time. So we're talking over decades, not immediately. Very little of this is going to happen immediately. This takes time, just like with the unitary plan. My last slide is, again, just a reminder of timeline. Basically, if a decision is made to withdraw and replace today, then we need to speak to the minister, we need to advise him of what we're proposing to do, and he provides us with some directions, including notification dates. We go through that notification, submission process, hearings processes, and then decisions at the end. The minister, as you know, wrote us a letter a couple of weeks ago, and his very clear direction is that he, assuming this goes ahead, he is happy with the notification of late October, early November, and about an 18-month time frame for the process. Mr. Chair, that's it for my presentation. I hope that that's been helpful and focusing on some of those key matters that are important to the committee. You can probably just take that off, maybe, Sandra, and we'll just see how we go with questions. Thanks.
Kia ora, thank you so much to you and the staff. I know this is not easy for the team. This is not the way we would normally do this sort of process, and that was the same with Plan Change 78, so unfortunately they're getting used to this. But yeah, just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work in a short amount of time. I'll just quickly read out the additions, so for clarity, what's in the agenda and then additional. So I've added the time frame that ensures submitters to have a genuine and adequate opportunity to be heard by the independent hearings panel, and that will also be local boards if they choose to. The plan enabled capacity achieved in the draft replacement plan is modelled as exceeding 2 million homes. That's under all. Auckland Council has a firm position that and this is after talking to some councillors about this, note that Auckland Council has a firm position that the outcomes for Aucklanders are more important than meeting a theoretical housing capacity target, and that the Independence Hearings Panel and Auckland Council as final decision makers must be able to focus on achieving the best outcomes for Auckland through the final form of the plan-enabled housing capacity. Note that urban design controls and Auckland Council's Urban Design Panel are critical to ensuring the livability of Auckland as it grows, and the intention for the Urban Design Panel to be adequately resourced to respond to the plan change once operative. That's feedback from Councillor Darby and others on that one. Request that the Minister, that when determining the expertise of the independent hearing commissioners, that this includes urban design, architecture, planning, infrastructure, economics and law, is just some of the skills. This is from Councillor Bartley, who's got a lot of concerns about the changes to minimum car parking. She asked for this to be added if possible. Request advice in the new term of council on the impacts of the former government's removal of the ability of councils to include minimum car park requirements in their planning documents, with a focus on areas without access to good public transport. And then there's a K, which is around our request that the Mayor reiterate to ministers in relation to greenfields. So I'll just read them. Sorry, it's technical and long. Auckland Council's future development strategy provides for 15,000 hectares of future urban zone land over 30 years, of which around a third has already been zoned. Only residential and business zone land is counted towards the plan-enabled capacity under the MPSUD, so that's under the law. Provision of infrastructure requires planning, sequencing, not just delivery. Currently, growth does not pay for growth, as we've discussed under the many private plan changes coming at us, rather than all ratepayers are subsidising the cost of greenfield infrastructure. And last two, it is more efficient to utilise the existing infrastructure in urban areas than build new infrastructure in greenfields. That the Auckland Council looks forward to the government's promised new funding and financing tools, including development levies, that will ensure that growth pays for growth. That is what is currently in the recommendations put forward. Now we will go to questions of the staff, and I think Deputy Mayor would like to go first, and then I've got Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to, you've gave a very good presentation, thank you, but I just want to clarify some questions. And look, I'm happy for brief answers, but just want, for the record, some key points from my perspective. So can you confirm that council actually asked central government for a way to exit Plan Change 78 to provide downzoning in high-risk floodplains? That we actually asked government?
Yes.
Can you confirm that council cannot stage the replacement plan by doing one part now and leaving other parts for later? Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you confirm that council cannot adjust, i.e. lower, the government set housing capacity target of 2 million additional dwellings?
Correct, we can't. Yep.
Thank you. Can you confirm there is no third option beyond either continuing with Plan Change 78 or replacing it under a new process?
No, that is not my advice. There is no other option.
Thank you. Can you confirm that we will temporarily return to the Auckland Unitary Plan zoning rules once the Minister approves our request to remove Plan Change 78 and opt out of MDRS until the new plan is operative?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Can you give me confidence that the replacement plan, should we decide to adopt it today, will have plenty of time for Aucklanders to input into it before it comes back to us for adoption?
Yes.
We've asked for an extended 7-week process, right?
Yes, we have. We've asked for, I think, a 7-week process for submissions. Yep.
Thank you. Now, noting the current local boards have had a chance to input into the draft, I'm interested, is there a role for the new local boards after the election, I know that we will, to have a chance to input into this process? I've heard that the local boards can actually submit themselves to the IHP, is that correct?
Yes, there will be an opportunity. Yep.
To feedback as a board,
yes, that's
and
right.
to submit to the IHP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh. Okay. And if we don't decide a replacement today, are we at risk of the Minister stepping in and doing it for us?
Yes, we are. The Minister has quite different and specific powers. So I think it's quite clear with the correspondence that he's had with us that he will do something. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions. First one's around natural hazards. The second one will be around greenfield sites. And the third one will be around costs. So just around, and this is in context of the experience of flooding during the storm events, Megan, and the Kemu River flooding. So I don't know if you can answer these, or I'm sure you've got staff that can. But, you know, many Aucklanders would actually like Auckland Council to have the ability to say no to new houses being built in flood-prone areas without being, you know, taken to court by landowners in doing so. So there's kind of 3 parts here. I'll give you all 3. So can you explain which of the 2 plan options give council the greatest ability to stop housing in flood-prone areas? And kind of related to that, can you explain the difference between down zoning land and council's abilities to change its rules and policies to decline a resource consent as it pertains to a flood-prone area? And thirdly, can you explain what is the likely effect on the landowner's property value if it is downzoned by way of trying to minimise flooding impact on housing?
Thanks, Councillor Sayers. Phil, can I get you to answer that? And Gary, just be on call if to assist with any of the value matters. Thanks, Phil.
Right, through the Chair, to the first question, the draft replacement plan change provides the best vehicle in order to be able to address natural hazards, because it can both address zoning as well as address the resource consenting regime. The second question, which is about the ability to decline applications that come in. Chapter E36 of the Unitary Plan, which applies across all zones, right from the city centre through to rural production zone, is used to address any application, whether it's a subdivision, changes of use or new development, that seeks to occur in a location that is subject to natural hazards. Through the risk assessment process that Megan spoke about, the activity table will then apply what's called an activity status to that resource consent. The activity statuses that we're looking to use are far more stringent than what we've got in the unitary plan at the moment. That will enable for the processing staff assessing that resource consent to be either able to condition a consent and still issue it, or in many cases to be able to decline a consent, should people wish to do things which present real risk to life.
And the third part there was just about if someone was able to answer about effect on property value if it's downzoned.
Kia ora koutou through the chair. Councillor, I think it's fair to say that property values are in the main determined by location in terms of what that location offers in terms of access to things that people want in their daily lives. Zoning policy does have an impact at the margin, and if you allow more development potential, referred to as upzoning or intensification, then values generally appreciate. However, there are two caveats to that. If you're talking about areas that are known to be at risk from natural hazards, then some of that would already be capitalised or included in the land value, and so I guess that would work against the potential appreciation or uplift from allowing more density. People would know that that property is at risk, so I think that would moderate any uplift. And so if you're talking about downzoning relative to what would otherwise be enabled, I think you have to take that into account. Also in the context, we're not just talking about one property, we're talking about a wider market, and so we know that if we were to just treat this one property in isolation, the effects would be bigger than if we look at it in the bigger picture of a lot of changes to many properties, I think would reduce the effects one way or the other. So I hope those sort of general comments help you without having access to the specifics.
Thank you very much. Richard, my second one was just around greenfields, and I read in the report, I think it was paragraph 50 or 60 around there, talked about green zoning, land that was already live in green zones would, I think, just continue under the replacement plan. And my question's around what about the rest? You know, the kind of what's in our unitary plan that's yellow is future urban zones, that is green, is obviously opening up new housing and greens in rural land. So is there any change to that expectation in terms of the growth in greenfield areas?
Through the chair, Councillor Sayers. So in the replacement plan change and plan change 78, there are no changes proposed to land that is zoned future urban. That's approximately 10,000 of the original 15,000 hectares of future urban. So if it's been live zoned over the last few years by private plan changes and it's now operative, that will count towards capacity. But it counts towards capacity in plan change 78 because it's got that urban zoning. And in many cases, it's also got the urban zoning in the replacement. There are a few examples where between plan change 78 and now, there is some land that has been live zoned in that future urban area, so that does count towards capacity, but there is no proposal in the replacement to add additional residential or business zoned or urban zoned land in the future urban areas for the reasons outlined in the report and also as noted in the Chair's additions to the resolutions.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, the final question is just around costs. And what would be the costs of proceeding with Plan Change 78? And what will be the downline cost implications? What would they look like if we had to prepare alternative variations such as for heights, walkable catchment, downzoning for flooding, and withdrawing from the MDRS?
Through the chair, I might just talk generally to this because it does depend upon decision making which the new council would need to make should it chooses to keep going with Plan Change 78. There's probably a couple of factors that come into it. One is around the costs that council face around sending letters out to notify people of changes to the unitary plan. So if Plan Change 78 was to continue and there was to be simply a singular further change to address the light rail and natural hazards, then that cost would be in the order of $2.5 million to mail out to all Aucklanders. Should it proceed in a different arrangement with multiple changes, then those costs could be more than that. For the draft replacement plan change, the $2.5 million is the same cost that would apply, same group of Aucklanders that the mail out would need to go to. Probably the second thing which needs to be considered with respect to costs then are the appeal costs that council might face. Plan Change 78 operates through a process where the Minister for Resource Management Reform plays a role in the determination of appeals. The streamlined planning process, which is the one which is proposed for use under the draft replacement plan change, does provide for the courts to play that role. So there's a variable there in terms of costs for who may wish to come forward with appeals and how far they may wish to progress through the courts. But the general statement across all of that for both is that within operating budgets we're providing for this, and it is factored into the LTP.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leone.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to the comment about the staged approach, and I know that obviously you've answered that question, Megan, but I just wanted to ask, were there any options that were looked at when your staff have been gathering the information on this to look at whether there's any viable options around a staged approach?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. No, we haven't. The plan changes don't get staged, and so there wasn't any options looked at for that. No.
Okay, thank you. Just coming back to the economists and some of the points that have been raised around affordability of housing, and obviously I know that in the past we've talked about intensification, and the more housing that we have in Auckland, the more affordable it would be, and you've answered some of that. Can I just get some of the pros and cons that we have seen over the last 10 years in terms of the intensification and the economic perspective on that going forward?
Thank you, Councillor, and through the Chair. Auckland's in a fortunate position that because of the change we made with the unitary plan in late 2016, there's quite a lot of data available now and a lot of research, and some of that's got into peer-reviewed international journals. And so from that, we can draw some quite important conclusions. So the additional capacity or flexibility that was enabled in 2016 with our existing urban land has led to a significant increase in the number of homes. And while we can observe that, we need to know, is there more than we otherwise would have gotten given economic conditions? And the key finding is that in the first 5 years, we've had 22,000 more homes in Auckland, so that's from 2016 to 2021, than would otherwise have been the case. If you put that into context, in our residential zones we had around 66,000 homes consented over that period. So it's really about a third of the homes that we've seen can be attributed solely to the more flexible land use. And there's some intuition about why that comes about. We're allowing ourselves to get more yield out of existing land. We're allowing people the choice for their incomes to consume or use less land for a home. And that's why we've seen people mediated through developers as their agents, taking up the option for given their incomes, to get locations that fit their budget and they can use less land. So we see the terraced house, townhouse typology. So of course, when we get more of something than otherwise, that has impacts on the price of things. And so there's pretty good evidence. It's gotten into a peer-reviewed journal that we can just observe the rents that we've been seeing in Auckland. The rental price growth has been on a lower path than other cities in New Zealand. And we can see that statistically there's a material effect. So rental affordability has been better than it otherwise would have been the case, and the estimate is around 20% better in terms of rents relative to incomes. House prices is a little trickier because there has been a lot of movement with the, notable movements in interest rates, very low in the wake of the pandemic and then very high. So what we can observe is the way that Auckland house prices have behaved relative to other cities in New Zealand, and we can see that the relative growth in percentage terms during that period was lower, and then it's fallen back as well to something closer to pre-pandemic, although still above that. We can see other evidence that suggests we would expect a price effect, and I think we'll see more of that in terms of house prices. What I would say is that we look at affordability, a key measure, the median house price relative to incomes. It's now 7.5 times median household income. That's better than it was at the unitary plan, but we have to acknowledge that there are cyclical effects in the economy that affect that. I would put that in context and say, relative to the turn of the century, median house price relative to household incomes was a multiple of 5. And so the difference between what we have now, the median house price is $1 million in Auckland. If we go back to the turn of the century, if we had a multiple of 5 times the median household income, rather than $1 million, it'd be more like 680. So that's sort of how we've slipped in terms of affordability. So some improvement, but we're still a bit further behind. And of course that has implications for our ability to hold on to younger people, to make a go of it in Auckland, and our ability to attract talent as well. So I hope some of those things answer your question. I don't want to go on and take too much time. Thank you.
Okay, and just one final question, and I think it's probably going to be a difficult one to answer anyway. I know that there's been a lot of concern raised around our schools already being full in terms of intensification going forward, and what we can be doing as council to obviously look at what we can be advocating in that space. Is there anything that we can be doing in terms of this, or do we just have to wait for the consultation to go out and then go from there?
Thanks through the chair. Look, the situation we're in, just broadly around infrastructure or using schools as an example, is exactly the one that we are in now, where we cannot and do not wait or plan to provide infrastructure and then enable intensification. So with the school example, we try and work really closely with the Ministry of Education. We give them our data, we show them what some of our population projections are to understand where we're enabling that in the unitary plan or whatever plan change we're talking about, so that they can then think about, well, do they need to start purchasing land or developing or extending schools, whatever. So, and we do that, of course, with our own infrastructure providers as well. So the situation is, yes, the unitary plan is going to point towards where the council thinks more intensification is appropriate and could go, and that is a signal, say for the Ministry of Education. But it doesn't stop or halt development until, say, a new school or something is built. So I think we're in a similar situation here. No kind of delay in this is going to make it any easier to do that. We just have to keep assisting our ministry colleagues in the work that they need to do to provide the kind of schooling that they need to into the future.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thanks. You might need to come back to me with other questions if that's okay, Chair, but I'm just trying to find Gary Blick's presentation. We got a workshop which had really fantastic data around demand for city centre homes and expected yield, distance to the city centre, all that kind of stuff. That's all super important to our decision today, and I can't find it here. Could we, it might be a question for you, Chair, is there a way that we can get this up on Nexus and circulated to members? I actually asked for it in the workshop as well for that to happen.
Yeah, I'll just have a look. It should be from that workshop. It was on the, was it the 17th?
Maybe I'm just silly, yeah.
Was the 17th? If it's not on Nexus, we'll just have to try and find that presentation. But is there anything you could clarify with Gary at this moment?
Not at this stage. I'd like to see the data. Thank you, Chair.
If I could just respond to that, thank you for your interest, Councillor. I think there were some slides. I think it was the workshop of the 10th of September, perhaps. They might be included in the slide pack of the workshop of the 10th. And of course, a key slide from that is in today's presentation regarding the map of the forecast of this distribution.
That's my favourite slide.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor, I think on Nexus, and sorry, this is slightly out of order, but I think if you do go on the 10th all the way to the bottom, no, maybe it's not there. Okay. Okay.
We'll clarify and fix that.
Yeah. You can remember, write down any questions you might have, because Gary does have it all in here. He's very good at it.
Apologies, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions. So I'm in interest of everyone having a fair go, I'd like to ask a few and then reserve the right to come back if I may. But can I commence by saying that I have been so appreciative of we're all working under compressed timelines, and the staff have been amazing. So it's hard that we've got to today and everyone's so busy, but really can I commend everyone who has really been trying to help our pathway through this. And I feel the majority of us are supportive of intensification, but it's the process. So history is important to me because I think it gives us some insight in how we should be going forward. So my first question is to Megan. Megan, can you confirm that Plan Change 78 was notified on the 18th of August 2022 prior to the Mayor being elected in response to the National Policy Statement of 2020?
I'm sure that's right, councillor. I'm just not quite sure of the date, but I will take that as read.
that's fine,
yes,
because I've actually
that's
gone
right.
back and done quite a bit of research.
I know,
about
so
this.
no,
So I'm sorry if it sounds a bit pedantic. Can you confirm, which I think you should be able to, that at the time there were a lot of questions around risks and natural hazards and downzoning and concerns that with the rather scattergun approach of the MDRS that we may have infrastructure problems?
Look, my recollection, councillor, is that yes, definitely the issues of that kind of connection between capacity and infrastructure, and when that might all come together, and that has been a consistent through actually this whole council with some of these big conversations, including the unitary plan as well, that you'll recall.
But very specifically, though, the issues that were raised by some of us who were at the council prior to the mayor's election, that we actually raised issues around the inability to downzone where there were natural hazards.
I don't recall that as part of the Plan Change 78 conversations, because that, for me anyway, that came very large to the forefront post the 2023 floods.
It certainly came to everyone's attention,
yes,
but in the pressure that was coming on the council at the time, and that was, around the 18th of August 2022, before the mayor was elected, there was discussion around the pressure being put on council to agree to this, even though we knew that there were going to be problems with downzoning and there were potential risks in and around hazards. I don't want to put you on the spot, but all I want to do is to highlight why it's really important that all of the information is on the table, because I was brought up on the notion of act in haste, repent at leisure. So I'm not wanting to ask a whole lot of other questions on that, but just to highlight that there were people who were back then in 2022 highlighting what we're now using as the justification for really trying to fix one, there's a mistake which we potentially could have pushed back on. So I think I've got the information I need on that. So thank you for the information you've given us on the yields and modelling, and I'd love to drill into that, but I absolutely accept what you are telling us in terms of ministerial direction on that, although I do note that there's nothing on record this year in terms of the requests that I've had of pushing back on that 2 million yield, so that there's nothing in the correspondence that I've received to date. There may be something, Megan, that hasn't been sent through to me, but we haven't, it would appear, have pushed back. But I'm not going to drill down on that because I accept that that is the directive that we've had. I will ask on the modelling perhaps a little later on when Gary has put his information up. I'm really interested in what the modelling is showing on what the likelihood of a lot of our employment going into the future will be in terms of being city centre based. But I want to come to this issue of legal options that are available to us, and coming back to that meeting back in August 2022, in perhaps at that time whether we fully understood all of the options that were available to us. I would have hoped that we could have actually had more consultation before notification, and with that in mind, I asked council staff, whom I understand have been talking to our legal team, talking to some of the planners and the democracy services people who've been on my case in terms of helping me better understand what I can understand are my options, because whenever I've raised it amongst colleagues, it's like, no, you'll be sent to planning prison if you don't accept either or. And I'm not going to talk about any of the other options that got people into a little bit of trouble with perhaps. So with the hope that I'm not going to be sent to planning prison if I ask you this question, but I have been advised that if I look at the all of the material in front of us, that council, in fact, is not requiring us to submit a draft plan change by the 10th of October. But what we do need to do is to provide notice containing information on how the replacement plan change will comply with Section 4 of Schedule 3C. So I wondered if we could have one of the council legal, in-house legal team just come and explain that to me, because I'm not a lawyer. And I want to do the right thing for Auckland on this stuff, because I think we mucked it up with Plan Change 78, not pushing back hard enough on things that many of us knew might be the case.
Thanks, Councillor. Karina, happy to answer those questions. Thanks.
Through the chair, sorry, Councillor, can you please repeat your specific question?
So my question is, what information is available to us that we do not in fact need to submit a draft plan change by the 10th of October? This is making the assumption that we all today agree to withdraw Plan Change 78. So can I just put that on the table as a sort of given? But what we do need to do is to provide notice containing information on how the replacement plan change will comply with Clause 4 of Schedule 3C.
Through the chair, in terms of the notice that you need to give to the Minister by the 10th of October, if you withdraw Plan Change 78, there are specific requirements set out in Clause 75A of the first schedule of the Resource Management Act. There is a certain level of information that needs to be provided, and it may be difficult to provide that information without showing in a plan form how that's going to be achieved. You need to be able to confirm to the Minister that you are providing the same amount of housing capacity as was enabled in Plan Change 78. You also need to be able to establish how you're going to provide for the necessary intensification around the 5 named rail stations, and you also need to be able to explain how you're going to achieve the intensification required by Policy 3 of the National Policy Statement. It may be difficult to do that without a planning document.
So at the moment, Megan, I think where we understand that our staff, our planning staff, have been put under enormous pressure to prepare this. And the modelling takes 3 weeks, as I understand it. And we know that there have been errors. I think a fair and reasonable person might say, let's find an avenue where we can actually at least have a bit more time to correct the errors, to get something that is a little more sound before we actually go to submissions, because it's a big deal for the public to actually have to submit, and it seems unfair that we know that there might be...
Can we just stay to questions? Thanks, Councillor.
My question is, following on from the explanation around complying with Clause 4 of Schedule 3C, what might be available to us, not challenging the yield, not challenging these other matters, but just to provide a bit more time to actually make sure that any planning errors are corrected?
Thank you for the question. We do have, I think it's in the, I can't remember if it's in the C, I think, is it? Yes, sorry. So we are working to the timeframes that we've been given, and so there is a recommendation C, which just enables us, or whoever you choose, to just tidy up any obvious errors and anomalies coming through. That does not change policy direction, as you say. It's not about the capacity and things like that. It's just about any errors. We will have, that will give us opportunity to do that, whilst still also meeting the legislative requirement from the Minister around that 10th of October date to advise them of the key elements of the replacement plan change, which you really do need a plan change to kind of know what those key elements are. We are satisfied through that broad and normal process that allows us to tidy that up, but that will not erase every error or anomaly in the plan change prior to notification. It didn't in the unitary plan, it didn't in Plan Change 78, and it won't in this one, but it does give us some ability to do that prior to that legislative date we have.
In terms of good planning practice, and given the importance of Auckland to New Zealand, would it have been a good thing to have had some consultation before notification?
Through the Chair, our advice to you on these kinds of plan changes, so unitary plan, for example, Plan Change 78, for example, is that it is good practice and helpful to do some pre-notification consultation. When this has been discussed with either previous government or this government over the last few years, that was the intention from us. We were assuming that is what you would want. And so the timing with this government to be giving us these provisions to do exactly that, we were expecting it much earlier in the year, not in August. So that was our intention, Councillor, to do that, because that is, we think, the best practice. We were not able to do it in this situation.
Thank you, Chair. I reserve my right to come back with further questions a little later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Ashby.
Kia ora. Thanks for the presentation, and yeah, similarly just acknowledge all of the work in the background and the pressure you're under. Also acknowledging the pressure iwi and our Māori communities are under to try to respond to this. So I have just a couple of questions. The first is obviously, given the limited ability for meaningful input, or what I would consider meaningful input from iwi in particular, what proactive support can council offer to iwi through that submission process? A sort of linked question is, within the feedback that you have been able to get, you also haven't been able to really respond or do much with that within the time frame. So there's the process of not being able to maybe get quality feedback to you, and then the feedback you do have, not enough time to even respond to it. So, what assurances can you or can staff, I guess, give me that both the process, should this proceed through the submission process, what proactive, I guess, support can there be, and then also can you give me an assurance around how that feedback you do have can be worked through in the meantime? I guess that's one question. I'll come to a couple of others if that's okay.
Tēnā Ed. Yeah, it has been a big challenge, as you can read in the report, and this, as you well know, given the timeframes, a big challenge for council, a big challenge for iwi. We've done our best in the timeframe, but as you can see from the report, there's been very little we've been able to do to amend things to address some of the concerns that have been raised. So what can we do going ahead? We can certainly make sure that the team stay well connected with the iwi, kaitiaki and governance as well, to just continue to inform, answer questions about the specifics of the plan change. There is a recommendation to seek that the government, I guess, funds, supports a friend of the submitter service, which we've used for these big plan changes in the past, where that friend of the submitter isn't preparing submissions on behalf of the community or iwi, but they're there independently of council staff to provide a bit of extra technical support. But I guess the assurance we can give you is that if the plan change does proceed, the replacement, we will continue that engagement, answer questions where we can. We can't go to the extent of helping draft submissions, as I think you and members of the committee will know, that's sort of crossing the line a bit between council's regulatory role and sort of funding iwi to prepare submissions, but we'll certainly have all staff available to continue to share as best we can. And we will continue to sort of receive and look at feedback as it comes in. That's the best we can do.
Thank you. And so, and yeah, look, I do understand that point between advocacy and your regulatory function. But I guess it sounds like there'll be an assurance that those teams or staff will be continuing to connect. I suppose I've got just two other questions. Linked to the sort of first part was, you know, a lot of these concerns raised were, and some of the submissions we've seen have been quite detailed in terms of the things they're wanting. Specifically, for example, to master planned areas in an iwi kind of precinct, for example. But given that a lot of the concerns, I guess, generally around stormwater, wastewater, sort of infrastructure issues, I guess that the not wanting the water quality to be undermined through intensification, which is always an obvious issue pushed by iwi, and other ones are around unscheduled cultural landscapes or view shafts in particular, and also similarly unscheduled or unknown or unscheduled wahitapu. So probably the water and the land, the view shafts or landscapes one in particular. You know, what mechanisms, I guess, through this plan change might there be? I guess in the submission end, the obvious ones through the hearing, but what other mechanisms might there be for council to pick up and work those things through in the meantime? And then I have just one last question, which is quite specific.
So in terms of sites of significance, that would fall within the umbrella of the Māori Cultural Heritage long-standing program. So the mechanism potentially could be council supporting a submission from iwi to put some constraints in place that aren't in this replacement plan change at this stage. So, for example, if there is a PAR site that isn't currently recognised in this plan change or in the unitary plan as a site of significance, then, as we did through Plan Change 78 submissions, worked alongside iwi to see where there might be some new restrictions put in place. So there is more flexibility with this replacement plan change, I guess, to put new restrictions in place, possibly, or certainly to hold the line and not exacerbate or, you know, introduce new problems through the plan change. So I think that's one mechanism there. Longer term, of course, there are opportunities for subsequent plan changes to come in after this plan change. It's not the end of the story for all planning in Auckland. And then there is the full plan review. So I think you're well aware, as the committee will be, that subsequent plan changes, full unitary plan review. But in terms of this process here, it is like we did with Plan Change 78. Are there some things that we've missed? No doubt there are. What can we do within the constraints and the time frame to actually, by the time we get to the hearings on a replacement, if it goes ahead, put those constraints, restrictions in place, whether that's for water quality, cultural sites, views to significant sites. Those are the sort of key things, as you mentioned. Yep. So it's not the end of the story. Absolutely, there is an opportunity. Yep.
Thank you. And just one last question, if you'll indulge me, which goes in the opposite direction, which is rather than constraining, enabling. And this is a specific question around the the metro centres in the west, specifically New Lynn, Henderson, and some of the design height to boundary sort of ratio wedding cake things around the rail stations in particular, and how my understanding that through PC 78 and adopted up into this, the CBD doesn't have those same requirements. So I guess in the west there's a need for economic development in those hubs and to build critical mass in those hubs, those two specifically. So I guess it's just a question, and I guess that's going to be detail will work through submissions and hearings, but just why is there a variation in the treatment?
So, through the chair, the August draft that went out for consultation had an approach to the 10 and the 15-storey areas around those metropolitan and other metro centres for 10 and 15-storey buildings that had a, we call a height in relation to boundary control that really required you to amalgamate usually 2 or 3 residential properties in order to get your full 10 or 15 stories. And that's to address things like overshadowing, loss of privacy, dominance, and acknowledging that these residential suburban streets are very different to Hobson Street, Nelson Street, and inner city type development. So it's, that's why that version was in the draft. In the agenda version, there is a slightly more permissive approach, which does allow taller buildings closer to neighbours and tries to moderate the impacts through a different technique to height to boundary. And I think there will be some discussion about that in a bit more detail further to come in the meeting. But it's really balancing that, allowing for 10 or 15 stories on every single property, which is quite an unusual outcome and probably unlikely, but having planning rules that allow for that versus planning rules that perhaps steer things more towards amalgamation before you can get that height. Yeah.
Thank you. And to that point, the Mayor and Deputy Mayor have or I think it's now Deputy Mayor and Councillor Baker have a bit of an amendment on looking at going back to the original that was presented in height in relation to boundary. But
So can I just clarify, in all cases, even in the draft version from August, it's still possible to get a lot of building mass bulk intensity for your first 5 or 6 stories. It's just at the upper levels there's a sort of stepping back, but it's not as though it's not allowing significant intensification up to that sort of 6 levels. It's just beyond where you have to sort of start to amalgamate sites to get the height under the August version. Yep.
thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you.